So now let's make the transition into the capitalizing on opportunities. There was some primary research done by John Dewey on the buying cycle that individuals and families naturally go through when circumstances evolve and change, and how that process works. Jeff, can you walk us through that process?
Sure. You know, it's interesting. We rarely really think about each of the steps, but once you actually break it down and you think about the difference of how it applies to buying different things, it's really fascinating. You know, you think about we're satisfied. Everything's great. We don't know that there's any issue, any problem, any concern. We're all good. And we like being satisfied. But all of a sudden, an issue manifests itself in some way. Now, when we think in terms of things other than financial services issues, it could be that you put your key in the car and it doesn't crank up and you have an issue. It could be that you pull your suit out to put it on in the morning and you realize that you've got a big stain on it, but that's where you see the issue. Once you identify the issue, then it's time to determine what are my alternatives. What could I do that allows me to move forward even though I have an issue? Well, if it's turning the car on, you might say, well, I could take another car. I could call an Uber today. I could not go. I could call a friend, whatever. But ultimately, once you understand your alternatives, you have to make a decision. This one seems right for me. You have to actually implement that decision, really important, and then you're satisfied all over again. The dynamic that's so specific to our world is that issue doesn't manifest itself until it's too late. We can't go back and undo something that's created that issue. So now we have to deal with the results or the negative consequence of what that issue has created. I think in our world, our responsibility and commitment to our clients is to ensure that because we understand how all these pieces work and the role that they play in financial success, we should be having conversations ahead of those issues so we can contemplate, should we do something, or do we just choose to accept the potential consequence to ensure that we accomplish our goals?
So it's a bit like preventative maintenance in a real sense, to help people think through the types of issues that are likely to come up over the course of their lives, and to help them think through steps that they can take today to, again, mitigate those downstream negative consequences.
Exactly.
Okay. So, Linda, as I think through that, I go back to prior conversations on the importance of feelings and emotions. And as Jeff was going through his example of the key in the car, I had a very visceral reaction because I've had that happen to me, and I'm right back in that moment, and the feeling of frustration manifested itself through my body. I would think that feelings and emotions play a very large role in the buying cycle. Can you talk through how that plays out?
Absolutely, Phil. And of course, you're spot on right. If you think of the buying cycle as kind of a clock, you know, when the issue arises at what we will visualize at 12 o'clock, there are emotions on both sides of the table, from the client emotion, and you just pointed out, there's probably some frustration. With financial issues, unlike automotive issues, there might be some fear. There might be, as you say, Jeff, maybe some regret, but there's generally some sort of negative emotion associated with that. Now, on the other side of the table, from the practitioner or the advisor side, when somebody is fearful, when somebody is regretful, when somebody is upset about something, we want to be calming. Now, we know from prior segments of our Certified Wealth Strategist program the importance of listening to our clients. So this is another place where we want to question, well, how did that make you feel, and what alternatives have you looked at so far? But we really want to get into the feelings of that and be sort of drawing them out in a very, very comforting way. When we go kind of around the circle, where you know a client is looking at alternatives, what could I possibly look at? This is a place where advisors' emotions often really get in the way. I know you have an issue. I know you are exploring alternatives, and I know that I'm one of the people that you are considering to help you through that issue. And I also know that you're probably considering one or two or three other people. And what the advisor is really prone to do, if they're not careful, is to get up and blah, 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 why we're better, blah, 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 different process, blah, 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 better tools, blah, 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 good results. And two things about that you ought to know. Everybody's saying that. And I promise you, in that exploring alternative stage, if you are the one advisor who draws them out, who keeps them talking about it, that you'll be the one who wins that business. You know, one of the things that we know with absolute certainty is that you cannot counteract emotion with fact. When you get up to this looks good to me, then we can sort of put in all the facts. I want to go then back up to the 10, 11 o'clock spot where you've got a client or maybe a prospect who says, I'm fine where I am. Just stop for a minute and think about your current book of clients. How many of them in your first interaction said, oh no, I'm perfectly fine as I am? And this is a place where, without being unkind, as a matter of fact, it really is a kindness to alert them to some possibilities, some things that aren't keeping them up at night but maybe should. So we actually could create a little bit of discomfort where comfort existed when it is appropriate for the client's financial well-being.
Let me ask one question. So if I understand you, what you're saying is, as we begin to explore those alternatives and determine what the right course of action is, we have to be really careful that it's not about us, the advisor, and instead focus on the client.
So visualization is so important. Linda, your example of thinking about the buying cycle as the face of a clock and starting at 12 noon when something changes. But it dawns on me that clients or prospects always don't come to us at 12 noon when something has changed. Sometimes they come to us at 5 or 6 on the face of the clock when they're examining alternatives. What are the advantages and disadvantages of coming in when something has immediately changed vis-a-vis when you're in the midst of examining alternatives? How do we handle that differently?
The real answer here is questioning. We want to become Olympic level question askers. We can't control when in the cycle the client comes in, but the simple, tell me why you're here today, or tell me what's on your mind. And by the way, this is an open-ended question. The brain will naturally default to closed-end questions, so we want to really develop the skill, and we'll work a lot on this, of asking open-end questions. But if you go all the way around the clock, I'm examining alternatives, continue to question. What alternatives are you examining? What has looked good to you? What has fallen short, do you think? So that by the time we get to, we're going to take some action, this looks right, we understand the language, the issues, the problems, the obstacles, where the inertia might lie, and can address the real issue for the real client. So literally all the way around the buying cycle, I think the key is really excellent questioning.